Let's kill that creepy music. Welcome back to Control Room, my friends. It is July 22nd, 2026. I'm Joe Pasevich coming to you from Marshfield Community Media in Marshfield, Mass. We're in Studio B once again. It's always an adventure coming in here. It's a nifty little studio. And if you want to come into the studio and start your own podcast and get famous, this is probably where you're going to be working. It's a very interesting place. Hey, what's going on? Well, the biggest thing going on right now is they're still scaring us in this town with the talk of an override, the need for an override. The $7 million deficit that they claim we have is a hoax. New numbers have come out from the state indicating when they started this talk about the town having a $7 million deficit going into fiscal year 27. We just finished fiscal year 26, okay? Ended on June 30th. We're in fiscal year 27 now. And they're trying to tell you that to get through this fiscal year, which starts in July 1st and goes into June of 2027, end of June 27, we need $7 million additional taxes. That's on top of over $3 million of additional taxes and fees that we're going to be collecting from you. So they're telling us from year to year, from fiscal 26 to fiscal 27, the town needs over $10 million more. It's just, I don't think it's ever happened. So it's a made-up figure. It's basically asking every town department to give us their ultimate wish list and also build in projected raises for union personnel. And that's what they want. Well, we don't know what the unions are going to get. The negotiations haven't finished, if they've even started yet. And we don't even know, and we didn't even have all the figures from the state indicating how much aid we'd be getting from the state in terms of money for the schools and in unrestricted funds. That is money you can do anything with. Well, guess what happened? So after all that talk about a $7 million override, a $7 million deficit, and all the scare tactics employed, and we'll talk about those in a second, how it happened. What happened? Well, the state issued some new figures. Okay? And the new figures from the state, what they call cherry sheet numbers or cherry sheet estimates from the Massachusetts Department of Revenue, indicated we're going to be getting more money from the state. Now, state aid is a problem across the Commonwealth. Towns really are not getting what they should be getting back from the state. The state has a budget that is bloated and that is being spent on things that you really shouldn't be spending it on. And so state aid numbers are typically kind of anemic, but nevertheless, we are going to be getting more from the state than was originally projected when they started talking about this $7 million deficit. So that's a good sign. There are numbers within the school department that don't make sense, that need to be revised to the tune of like $1.6 million. There are people who are retiring from the school system. We won't be paying their salaries. That's called attrition. There's at least $1 million in savings there, from what I understand. And yeah, some personnel have been given pink slips. They've been put on notice that they're getting rehired for the next school year is doubtful right now. And from my information that I've gotten indicates that a lot of those people have already decided to move on anyway. There are also some expenses that were overestimated, and there are also some revenues that were underestimated. So when you add it all up together, the thing about a $7 million deficit is just going away. But they're still going to push for a $7 million override. In other words, the only thing keeping us from now voting on a $7 million override is a vote of the majority of the select board members, we have 3 selectmen or 3 select board members or 3 select persons, whatever, and to put an override question on the ballot. To get an override, first town meeting should vote for what they call a contingency budget. People should be able to go to town meeting, get a clear, concise, print out a sheet or whatever, guidance material showing if we have the need to assess additional taxes on the people, here is where the money will be spent, and this is where it will be spent, what department, how it will be spent. That process was never done transparently and legally, but it's still a $7 million override got put onto the town meeting warrant back in June. From what I saw, it wasn't exact. It was incomplete. And again, it wasn't put on the warrant properly. So it's illegal. Not basically illegal, it's illegal. But to actually levy those funds, in other words, bill the property owners of Marshfield for that extra $7 million. Now remember, we're already getting almost $3 million or more from regular tax increases that are built into the system. Every year, you're guaranteed a 2.5% increase in your real estate tax levy. So all the real estate taxes in your town go up collectively by 2.5%. No more, no less. And on top of that, you get fees and you get a factor called new growth. If you build new houses, well, guess what? You can tax for all those new improved properties. So anyway, the bottom line is that you're already getting $3 million or more in additional revenues. You're already getting additional revenues from fees increases. And they want to tack onto that $7 million, for which there's no real justification. And the process for which was not done legally. Okay, so if I haven't confused enough, hopefully you're fully confused now. But anyway, so to now actually send those bills out, you need the vote. You need to have a vote at the ballot box. The only way you can now have a vote at the ballot box is if the select board votes to put that on a ballot and send it out to everybody. And what would happen is that basically you would get something that looks like this. It would be titled it would be titled Override Ballot Question, and it'll say something to the effect of, shall the town of Marshfield be allowed to assess an additional X millions of dollars in real estate and personal property taxes for the purposes of funding public safety, education, public works, library, and general government expenses, beginning the fiscal year, in this case, July 1st, 2026, which is fiscal year 27. So this is basically how the question will look if it goes to the ballot. But the select board is deadlocked. You've got one person who is not willing to put the override on a ballot, and another select board member who is in favor of putting the override on a ballot and having a vote. So the measure fails. So whoever gets elected to the select board this Saturday, remember this Saturday from 8 to 4, the special election to fill the vacant select board seat is being held. 8 to 4 this Saturday, July 25th. There's going to be a special election to fill the vacant seat, the seat that was vacated when Trish Simpson resigned or ran away or whatever you want to call it. And then we'll have 3 selectmen. Then it will be possible to have a vote and have a majority on an issue to pass any measure or motion before the board. If you have a pro-override person elected to the select board this Saturday, you will get an override ballot question this year, probably September 1st. It'll probably get scheduled for September 1st, which is the day of the state primary, when we vote in a primary election for governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what will happen. Now, if you vote for me, I will not, as a member of the Select Board, vote to put an override question on the ballot. I will not. Because, number one, I don't think we need it. I think our financial situation is not as dire as they want you to believe. And number two, the process by which we've gotten to this point has not been done. It wasn't proper. It wasn't legal. What I will do as your next Select Board member will be to first find and hire a new town administrator. That's number one. The town administrator is the key person when it comes to assembling a budget for the town each year. And I will charge that new administrator, along with my other board members, with putting together a budget by the end of this year that can be fully vetted and debated. While that's going on, each department must do an operational audit. In other words, in the school department, they must say, okay, how many kindergarten students are we going to have this coming year? How many first graders, second graders? Where do they live? Which schools will have how many students in how many classes, and how many teachers and assistants does it take to operate to get through the school day? If a school has like 3 assistant principals, I got a problem with that. If a particular grade level has 8 or 9 tutors and helpers, etc. Now, this doesn't count special education. The needs and the requirements there are quite different. But in other words, all staffing and all spending practices have to be reviewed so we can get to an honest assessment, an honest and clear assessment of actually how much money we need. Once we know how much money we need, again, the town administrator, working with the advisory board and the various department heads, will come up with a clean budget. Not for fiscal year 27, but for fiscal year 28. That is, we're going to get through this fiscal year. We're going to go all the way into June of 2027 with the money we have. And with the additional revenues and the increased money from the state, and if necessary as a stopgap to use free cash from the recent year, we'll do that. And we'll work it into the budget. There will be a special town meeting again, probably in November, could be December. But that will be the time to fill the gaps. And at the same time, a clean, honest budget will be developed by our new town administrator. That's what we have to do. Where did this hoax come from? Where did it all come from? Why are they scaring us with closing schools and firing or laying off 50 or 100 teachers? Well, first of all, before I get into the history of how that all happened, let me refer you to an article. This actually appeared through the service called LinkedIn. And it applies to what we're going through here in Marshfield right now. It's titled Raises Today, raises as an increase in your pay. Raises today, layoffs tomorrow. Massachusetts teacher contracts will continue to collide with shrinking resources. There's a little broken up picture of Mayor Wu. Okay. Let me read some of this to you. It's written by a fellow named David Mancuso. It first appeared in the outlet called Contrarian Boston on July 11th, 2026. Boston agreed to a $181 million teachers contract last spring. This year, Boston Public Schools is cutting 570 jobs. And the debate that follows will be all about more money, not how to size a system serving fewer students. This is a common thing going on right now. These are the trends. As predicted across Massachusetts, a familiar sequence is starting to play out in school districts. Teachers' unions cheer a hard-fought contract won one year, and the school system announces layoffs the next. Nowhere is the pattern clearer than in Boston. In April of 2025, after more than a year of contentious bargaining and on the eve of a planned union protest of Mayor Michelle Wu's State of the City address, Boston Public Schools reached a deal with the Boston Teachers Union. The contract delivered raises of roughly 9 to 11.5% over 3 years to teachers who already earned an average of $120,000, adding an estimated $181 million in school spending. Wow. What the agreement did not do, critics note, was guarantee the district could afford it. Wow. So you can cut your nose off to spite your face, I guess. Is that the saying that applies? After Wu's reelection, the answer arrived. Facing a $53 million deficit, Boston Public Schools imposed a partial hiring freeze and proposed eliminating hundreds of positions. So what do you want? You want the big raises at the risk of being laid off? What do you want? The budget ultimately approved this spring cuts close to 570 jobs, many of them paraprofessionals and other school-based support staff. Refreshingly, Boston Public Schools Superintendent Mary Skipper pointed to, quote, collective bargaining costs, end quote, as one of the pressures behind the shortfall, an unusually direct acknowledgement that the raises the city agreed to are now part of the math forcing reductions. Take your pick. Boston is not alone. In Newton, officials approved significant raises to end an 11-day strike in 2024, with the mayor declaring this is a substantial, sustainable contract. There will be no layoffs. Really. 2 years later, the district is cutting staff, even after the city added $17 million to its education budget. In Marblehead, a deal that ended another 11-day walkout left the town needing its first tax override in 2 decades to cover the cost. Without it, officials warned dozens of positions would be cut to close a $7.7 million gap. Andover shed 34 educators amid its own bargaining fight, with a school committee member stating plainly that the district had warned the union that layoffs would follow if it met the financial demands on the table. And economics is not getting any better. I mean, Financial Times, have you been shopping lately? Have you seen your electricity bill? So everybody's feeling the pinch. Look at the gas pumps. Gas is back up to $4 a gallon, thanks to our insane policy in the Middle East, okay? The contract piece, however, is only one strand. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is there are some factors out of our control that contribute to inflation and contribute to the cost of living for the average homeowner, the average family supporter, or what have you. And we can't afford a tax increase right now. Then there's declining enrollment, which steadily reduces the per-pupil state aid that Massachusetts distributes through its Chapter 70 formula, because state aid on Chapter 70 is based on your students, which, by the way, as a side note, is why some people talk about how great MBTA zoning is. In order to get more support from people that want to see increased budgets, like in school systems, they'll leak it out or they'll spread the word, hey, if you go to town meeting and support an MBTA zoning article, right, guess what? You're likely to have another 500 students, and then your budget will go up from the aid that you get from the state. And then there's people that'll vote for that. They don't care if the town is destroyed by building MBTA zoning projects. People will sell out, in other words. Then there's declining enrollment. So Boston alone has lost roughly 3,000 students in 2 years, and Skipper, that's the Boston Public Schools super, has also called enrollment a long-term driver of cuts. Oh my goodness, we're losing students and we're going to get cuts in our budget. Laid on top are climbing health insurance costs and rising special education tuition, both growing faster than revenue. But the reason contracts sit at the center of the story is structural. Salaries and benefits consume the majority of any school budget. This is true. There's a formula you can use, like a 1% raise for all the teachers equals like an extra $1 million you have to come up with in the budget. Massachusetts, with its all-powerful teachers unions, spends roughly 80 to 85% of its money on compensation, salaries, sitting at the upper end of the national range. So in Massachusetts, that is where the money goes. When 4 out of every $5 are committed to people, there is almost no way to close the deficit without touching staff. And any raise negotiated in a good year becomes a fixed obligation and a bad one. And what happens? Layoffs. So the Massachusetts Teachers Association frames the problem squarely as inadequate state funding, which is true. The shares to the towns is nowhere near as high as it should be. Rejecting any trade-off between wages and jobs. In other words, give us our union members their wages, and don't lay anybody off. Districts counter that they cannot keep promising raises they cannot sustain. So we need to find sustainable raises. And one thing you don't want to do is have a big fat override, and then the bargaining units go, hey, we know you got the money. I would rather see bargaining units negotiate with the town and come to some sort of range of what's acceptable to both parties before we start talking overrides. Personally, I think there's a very high chance that we'll be having to put an override before the residents next year in 2027, not in this year, and looking forward to fiscal year 28. But what makes these people think they can terrorize and threaten and scare and propagandize the residents about an impending disaster? Like, oh no, we're going to close down schools, we're going to fire 50 teachers, et cetera, et cetera. What makes them think they can do that? Well, you have to kind of create sort of a mob atmosphere. And we've seen mob atmospheres in Marshfield many times. Since I got involved in the early 2000s, I remember when over 1,000 people showed up at town meeting to demand action against the Beacon 40B that was going in Wrexham, that was going to have a big impact on schools and the environment and traffic and town services, et cetera. Like I said, environment especially was a big impact. So there was a lot of people that showed up. When we were talking about building a new high school, look at the mob scene that occurred there. Whether you're for or against it, it's still a mob scene. Overflow crowds, heightened tension, lots of flaring tempers. And look at what's happened more recently. When I got on the Housing Authority and I wanted to see some reforms, I wanted to see more openness and accountability, they came after me. The establishment that managed the Housing Authority's day-to-day operations played a major role in basically getting people to demand my removal, my impeachment and removal, because I was upsetting the apple cart. I was not content to let business go on as usual. I was not going to go along to get along. Reforms had to be made. And I paid a heavy price for it. They came after me. Remember that over 6 hour long inquisition in front of the Selectboard that I went through? Ultimately, what did they find? They found that I had said some things on this show that people didn't like. That was it. So you're impeached and you're almost, and of course I was not removed from office, but I could have been. But the only thing they found in the official final report on the whole inquisition was that Joe said some things that people didn't like on his show. And the way they had portrayed and tried to describe what I said was incorrect, during the inquisition hearing. So they basically knowingly or unknowingly lied or misrepresented what I had said on this show. But it created a massive spectacle. And people across the political spectrum said to me in the days that followed, Joe, nobody should have to go through that. That was insane. You had people getting up at the microphone saying, "Oh, he called me by the wrong name," or he wore a. One guy said, "Joe once wore a camouflage like an army jacket to a meeting, and I'm a veteran, and I have PTSD. So seeing somebody in camouflage caused me to have a flashback." I mean, it was stuff like that. And then, of course, that created a giant mob scene. And then, of course, there was the time the chief of police called me at 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning on an official line and started to, I don't know what the word is really. Right now I just can't. But basically he threatened me. He said, "Joe, you said things on your show that aren't true, and I'm going to give you a chance to retract what you said on your show." And I was talking about the Karen Reed trial and the fact that Karen Reed's father, after she was found not guilty, he did an interview with media, and he said that after what his daughter had been through over the years, that this was an example of what the state or the government could do to a person. And Jerry, and then they have all the resources and all the time. They can drag you through a prosecution process for years, destroy your life basically, or make you put your life on hold at the minimum. And it happened to me. I was arrested here in Marshfield, and I was dragged through the court system for 16 months. And when I got to a jury trial, and the trial was over, it took the jury like less than 10 minutes to say, "Get out of here. Joe's not guilty. He didn't do anything wrong." But the town dragged me through the system. And so I just drew some parallels between the two. And I guess I also had mentioned that the chief of police, that I saw the chief of police in the courthouse because there were so many town officials there, as part of the support for the prosecution effort. And at the same time, a lot of town residents came to the trial to support me because they knew I was innocent. And I just happened to mention, "Hey, I saw the chief there." Now, was it his doppelganger? Was it years and years ago? More than 10 years ago? When he was like newly uniformed? So just the fact that I said that just caused him to make him want to call me on an official line and basically call me out and threaten me and say, "Oh, I've been easy on you so far, and you better retract what you said, or else." Basically, or else. He didn't say or else, but he was going to take action against me and encourage other people to take action against me. So I had to report that to the Selectboard. Now, the Selectboard, at that time, temporary town administrator Peter Morin was probably the first person to see my email, advised then Chairman Eric Kelly that he should have a hearing or a meeting with the chief. And the meeting would take place behind closed doors in executive session to ask the chief what happened, get his side of the story. Instead, the chief apparently insisted on making it a public hearing, give it widespread publicity and airing and broadcast it. It wasn't anything I did. I just experienced behavior from a town official that I was very uncomfortable with, to say the least. And it was the town administrator and the police chief that decided to make it into a spectacle. Could it have been handled a different way, like through the Human Resources Department? Should it have been just kept in an executive session where there was a back and forth and then a finding on what actually happened? No, some people wanted to make it a spectacle. And I suspect that one of the reasons why it was made into a spectacle is because of the Karen Reed trial and because of the numerous scandals involving police departments in Massachusetts, including the state police. And I haven't got anything against them. I mean, you'll find as many scandals in law enforcement as you will in religion and the clergy, as you will in academia. So, scandals happen, things happen, people misbehave. Sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's, misinterpretation of motives and such. But anyway, so that was like episode 2. First was my impeachment, then it was the spectacle around the police chief issue. And then they tried to impeach me a second time. So then came the Eric Kelly recall petition. This created a big sensation. Then we adopted basically open mic or public comment at select board meetings. And people started going to the podium at the start of select board meetings and letting loose all kinds of invective, insults, accusations, venting, basically. Unbelievable. Really, like poisonous diatribes and stuff like that. So the combination of this kind of a spectacle and the impact it had on people, and obviously it did have impacts on people. Trish Simpson completely backed down and folded on the hearing regarding my complaint regarding the police chief's behavior. So people saw how you can be forced to change your mind on something, how you can basically control what an official is going to do. And that's basically where this comes from. People in the school department learned from those spectacles, and so they staged a spectacle of their own, demanding a big override. Ultimately, that's what it came down to. They brought a big crowd to town hall. They brought a big crowd to an advisory board meeting and a select board meeting. And they brought the hooting and hollering and the cat calls and the whistles and the claps of all the people who felt that the schools were just being shortchanged and they needed a massive increase in their budget. That's where that comes from. And what came out of that was a very sophisticated PowerPoint presentation and printed documents. And the bottom line was, if you don't give us the money we want for the school department, we're going to close the school and we're going to fire 50 teachers, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to cut out freshman sports. We're going to reduce classes in certain areas and disciplines. I mean, just apocalyptic results for your education system in the town of Marshfield. It's crazy. It was way overplayed. And that's where we are right now, and that's how the threat of a $7 million override has gotten some legs under it. That's how they got a big crowd to show up at town meeting back in June. I went into the town meeting. I was at the back of the room. I had some serious medical issues. I really shouldn't have been there, but I wanted to see what was going on. And from the back of the gymnasium, you really couldn't see the graphics. You really couldn't hear the debate. And that's where hundreds of people were sitting. And I know they were not engaged in what was actually happening at the town meeting. They showed up because they were told, we need a big override. You've got to go to town meeting and vote for a $7 million override. And again, as I started out talking on this topic earlier, it's now up to the select board to decide if it's going to go on the ballot. If it goes on the ballot and passes, you're going to get hit. The town is going to get hit collectively with $7 million in additional taxes every year for the rest of eternity, basically. And then that $7 million is what they call a forever override. And it helps to build the base tax levy, which will grow then at 2.5% per year. So if you're collecting $100 million in real estate taxes this year, next year you can collect $102.5 million, 2.5% increase. If you're collecting $200 million in real estate taxes, multiply that times 2. So as the base tax levy increases, 2.5% of the successively larger number, it's like compounding, like if you have money in a savings account in a bank. Each year, the base or principal amount upon which your interest payment is based will be bigger year to year. So your taxes don't go up in a straight line. They tend to go up in a slight curve, asymptotic. Anyway, that's what's happening. Now the election again. Let me see how much time I have left. Yeah, but this is going to be kind of a short show. So the election again is this Saturday, the 25th, Saturday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the high school. I'm on the ballot. John Griffin is on the ballot. And Christopher Rowland is on the ballot. In my view, Mr. Rowland and John Griffin are basically, their insiders, they've been officials for or involved in town organizations as appointees. In Chris Rowland's case, he was elected to the Selectboard in, let me see, 2020 was it? Let me see, Eric. Yeah, was it? No, 2021 I think he was elected, and he was removed from office in 2024. He really didn't do much. He served with Fitzgerald and Kilcoyne for a time. And these guys are basically not bad people, but they, well, in some people's opinion, some people might have different opinions on that, but they are insiders and they will go along to get along, in my opinion. I'm the only person that for over 20 years, 25 years, close to 25 years now, and actually even when I was in high school and college, now I'm 69 years old, so I've been coming to Marshfield since I was a baby for vacation time and then extended periods of time in the 90s and then moving here full time in 2001. So I've seen the town change for the good and for the worse, for the bad. And I began, because my field is environmental science and political science, with I've seen things that have caught my attention and have caused me to visit town hall and file complaints and make inquiries and stuff like that. I've been doing that since I was in high school. And then when I started living here full time, I got involved in a lot of issues. People would come to me and say, well, we know you've got a background in this or that, or you have knowledge of something, of engineering, of environmental science, etc. You've got to help us out. I have done everything. I have filed lawsuits against the town. I have challenged decisions of the Zoning Board, Conservation Commission, Select Board. You know, like, for example, recently, you may have heard that the town administrator and the town council were proponents of an article to spend $3.5 million on roofing projects on town schools. And it was a no-bid contract. And I said to myself, how can you have a $3.5 million no-bid contract? That's against Chapter 30B and Chapter 16 of the Mass General Laws. You have to solicit bids. You have to advertise the availability of this work. And they also wanted to build solar farms or install solar panels on school property and town property, like the police station, DPW garage, and schools. But they weren't following the law. So I had a conversation with people at the state level about these things. I called them out. I called out the town on the $3.5 million no-bid contract. I had conversation with people at the state level that oversee this kind of activity. And lo and behold, the $3.5 million no-bid contract for roofing services disappeared. Poof, The next day, it was like announcement comes from town hall. We're not pursuing that anymore. Huh. And the Inspector General office of the state opens an investigation on the solar panel or the solar farm or solar panel installation contracts. From 2024 to 25, they investigate the solar panel contracts. And they issue a report in August of last year, 2025. Where has it been? It's been buried. My sources tell me it was consciously suppressed at Town Hall. But the investigation result from the Inspector General said the town had to respond, I think within 60 days, to all the faults and problems with these contracts that existed. And did the town ever respond? I don't know. I still haven't seen the town's response. So that's one thing I was involved with. Another thing is they wanted to put the new DPW barn over on Parsonage Street in an area that is in the floodplain. I found out they were going to spend millions of dollars to fill in the area and build a whole new drainage network for this filled-in floodplain area. And on top of that, the garage and the bay doors would be facing towards a densely populated neighborhood, residential neighborhood. And I just didn't like the location. I thought any infrastructure or DPW equipment should be kept as far away from the ocean or the moisture and the corrosive effects from that as possible. So I sued the town on various grounds. And lo and behold, they found, in the meantime, another property became available further up on Plain Street, which now turns out to me to be in a beautiful location for a DPW facility. It's drier, it's higher, it's away from the residential neighborhoods, and you don't have to spend millions of dollars to fill in a floodplain and take away flood storage capacity, which would look good, which would look bad, rather, in the eyes of Federal Emergency Management Agency, the people that oversee and create the floodplain maps and determine the base flood elevations, etc. And then there was the Beacon 40B, 200 units, unrestricted apartments. Huge impact to the schools, huge impact to vernal pools and wetlands areas and sensitive species habitats. Who fought that? Who got it downsized? All right? And as far as I know, people that live there are happy. They're basically happy with the place. There are some problems with the construction and ventilation and stuff like that. That's what I hear. And then the airport expansion should not have happened. But I was up against really powerful forces and interests. And I did get some concessions and some protections for the environment. And guess what? Back in April, the people renting the airport sent a crew to destroy vegetation along Plymouth Ave. Who caught them basically violating their own vegetation management plan and making the airport neighborhood look horrible along Plymouth Ave? I did. I filed the complaint. And they got caught. A violation was issued against the Airport Commission, which is ultimately responsible. But I think that the company leasing the airport should pay for the damage. But that still hasn't been resolved fully yet. Who fought the Maryland Street 40B? I did. Who fought the downtown 40Q proposal, Chapter 40Q proposal? I did. Who talked with Merrill Diamond and Brian Curtis? And Brian Curtis was on this show about the redevelopment of the so-called Webster Square downtown area. I remember my conversations with Merrill Diamond. I think he's gone now, rest his soul. But I said, Merrill, make the architecture, the facade interesting. Create an alleyway. Create a break in the buildings, which is where the K. Katie Burger's place is now. Try to find a destination restaurant to lease that large end unit, at the corner of Webster and Ocean. I said to Brian, build some sidewalks, put in some benches and trees in the Webster Square area that connected it to Merrill Diamond's property, Merrill Diamond's project. Create walkability. All these things were adopted, but I was involved. I was going to the meetings night after night, zoning board, planning board, select board, writing comments, asking questions at town meeting, and then being labeled an anti-government, venom-spewing conspiracy theorist naysayer because I'm over the target, and that's where the flack is the heaviest. So they want to convince you that I shouldn't be elected, that I'm unelectable. Well, I hope you help me to prove them wrong on Saturday, July 25th. Anyway, so that's what's happening. That's the election. And if you notice, I don't know if this picture will come up. I'll try to get this picture up. But the insider candidate, the pure insider candidate who's supported by the Democrats in town, the Democrat town committee will be working very hard to get Chris Rowland elected. And Chris Rowland is all on board with bringing an override question onto the ballot as soon as possible. And Jack Griffin has been waffling. He's like, well, I'll bring it to the ballot if it's legal, if it's this. It's easy enough to see that it's illegal. It was done illegally, okay? We shouldn't be voting on an override this year. So at the same time, these people, especially Griffin, now all of a sudden is interested in all the things that I'm interested in and have been fighting over for the last 25 years. All of a sudden he's an environmentalist. All of a sudden he's interested in the health of the town, etc. Right down the line. I'm an eclectic. I cover all these issues. All of a sudden he's the crusader for the town. My goodness. And he's trying to play upon the interests of fiscal conservatives, of which I have been one of the leaders for all this time. And what else are they doing? Like with the Rick Smith campaign earlier this year, they're bringing in the heavy hitters. Rick Smith spent over $12,500 to get elected to the select board. And if you look at the list of donors, there's a lot of heavy hitters on that and heavy support from the Democrat Party. On election day, I know the Democrat Town Committee head, John Bowes, was working really hard to make sure people got the vote out for Rick Smith because he's the best thing, the closest thing to an insider that the Democrats can hope for right now. And now the closest thing to an insider that I believe all the Democrats are getting behind is Chris Rowland. So what they tried to do now is create an association between the heavy hitters and Chris Rowland. And one of the most blatant, obvious ways they're doing this, and you won't believe it, is wherever you see a Chris Rowland sign, they're putting up a Patrick Carney sign. Now, I don't have this loaded into the system, but maybe I can show it to you on the camera. Can you see this, folks? You see that? Where you see a Chris Rowland sign, you're now going to see a Patrick Carney sign. And Patrick Carney's election is not until September. So if you're a Democrat and you like Patrick Carney, and I've heard people say, well, Patrick Carney's a Democrat and he likes to spend money. But we could have done worse. Well, to me, he's a ghost. He's never around. The other thing, that they're doing, besides Patrick Carney and his signs going up around the Chris Rowland signs, is this is happening. They're putting Mike Minogue signs next to Jack Griffin signs. In other words, if you're a Democrat, vote for Chris. If you're a Republican, like Mike Minogue, then you know Jack Griffin's your man. Now, does Jack Griffin have permission from Mike Minogue to create this? Does Mike Minogue have permission from Jack Griffin? Do they even know each other? But you'll see this around town, and this is just a way to try to sway votes. That's all they're doing, is just trying to sway votes. Oh, hold on a second. I got to try to get my my camera act together. Hold on. Let's see. So say, there we go. Sorry about that. Like I said, I'm in Studio B. I'm not too familiar with the situation here. So that's the story on the election. That's what you can expect to see. They want you to think that Mr. Griffin is not the ultimate insider. But everybody knows that Roland is favored by the town hall insiders because he's all for the override. He's on board. He wants you to vote on it on probably September 1st is my best guess as to when that will happen. And then Jack Griffin wants you to know that, well, he's going to let you vote on it, but at the same time, I really don't feel too good about it. That's called straddling the fence. And I'm just like, no, I'm not going to vote to put that on the ballot. There's no way. The process was a mess. Look at Maresco left in 25. And since then, we've had 2 different interim town administrators and 2 members of the select board that were really inexperienced and really didn't know how to handle the situation. And they were just, by omission, the town council and the interim administrators did not give those select board members good guidance. It was really shoddy. I think they let them twist. And my read of the situation is the town council and the interim administrators were just fine with seeing the select board members, Kelly and Simpson, just twist in the wind, because everybody knows that those 2 were leaning towards replacing the town council. And that would mess up the whole game board around this area. And we know that the town council is very close to the interim administrator, Peter Moran. So they're part of the same team in my eyes. Anyway. So that's what's happening. The investigation from the IG, we'll find out more about that. Pressures on the budget, pressures on the school departments, not just in Marshfield, around the state. This is a common thing. We have to learn to deal with it. We have to take the opportunity to really, again, do what I call an operational audit. And some people refer to it as zero-based budgeting. We need to basically look at the structure, the force structure of everything in town right now, if for no other reason than to try to create or instill or foster some trust of town government by the residents and the taxpayers. After the Maresco era, this is where we need a real reset. And this is the opportunity to do it. And if I'm on the select board, I am going to push to make sure that we do go through this reset, that we do go through this operational audit, so that when it comes to the other end of it, come out the other end of the pipe, everybody's going to say, yep, if we want this many police officers, if we want this much fire equipment, if we want this many teachers and this many classes and these programs and that programs, I see where it is and I see how much it's going to cost. And if I want more teachers or more police officers or more DPW crew members, then I can see that it's going to cost the town an additional whatever millions of dollars. I can understand. If I want the library open certain hours, if I want this slate of activities at the senior center versus this other slate, the alternative slate, here's the difference in the cost to the taxpayer. You need to get to that point, and you need to have it laid out clearly so that basically a sixth grader can understand it. We need to get to that point and establish that trust. And now's the chance to do it. So anyway, don't forget to vote. I'm going to cut it off here right now. I'm Joe Pasevich for Control Room. When you see me around town, please say hi, give me a shout. I'm on Facebook at Joe for Selectman, Joe for Selectman. You can look at some of my materials there. You can contact me anytime. And then after the election, I think we'll get back to more shows, some of the good shows that you're used to seeing here. And again, pay attention to Marshfield Community Media. They are covering so much now, so much more than they did. When I get involved here, another one of my volunteer activities, when I got involved, Marshfield Community Media basically just televised town meeting. And if you wanted to cover something like a zoning board or a planning board meeting, you had to come here and borrow a camera as just a citizen. And those cameras were big and clunky. And I did that many times and got a lot of great meetings and episodes of town government permanently recorded. But now MCM, Marshfield Community Media, is covering so much more, including sports. And they deserve our support. And they will need our support in the future. But it is, since things like town meeting have accessibility issues, and it's impossible for people to get to town hall to all the different meetings and hearings, live streaming through YouTube and through Marshfield Community Media is going to become ever more important as a way to stay informed. So please do that. Now, I sorry about the technical glitches, but again, I'm operating in sort of unfamiliar territory. And I will now check out. And I will see you at the polls on Saturday, 8 to 4. And again, if you see me on the street, just come and talk to me, okay?